John woke to the shrill cry of his alarm clock and lay there, rigid, his usual morning condition. But there was another reason John couldn't get out of bed. It was the weight. A weight that had nothing to do with his muscles or fat or sweaty blankets. John was weighed down by a piece of paper. The invitation to his high school reunion. From across the years, the words he'd heard in the schoolyard were still clear. You're a loser. No one will ever love you. John threw on an outfit. He didn't feel comfortable wandering around his home naked. John needed to shower and wash off the sweaty stink of desperate sadness. Most people would shower, then dress, but John was running late. They say cleanliness is next to godliness, but at that moment cleanliness was next to his prostate. John had 3 months until the reunion to turn his life around. First, he needed to clean up. The only reason he'd ordered so much takeout was because Delilah, the delivery peen, made John feel butterflies in his testicles. John suddenly realized the time. Distracted by his new drive to improve his life, he had become late. He needed to hurry, or he'd miss the bus to work. John called it his study, but it was basically for games and porn. Mostly porn. He was wasting time, dawdling, procrastinating. What had John achieved, aside from a mountain of crumpled tissues? John knocked over the computer. There would be no more hardcore gangbang binges for him. No, he was going to get a real date. John had left his apartment late, but if he caught the express bus, he might make it to work on time. John didn't really like his job, but it had 2 qualities in its favor. 1, he could pay his rent, and 2, Barbara. Currently John's top candidate for his reunion date. John noticed a moderately attractive peen waiting at the stop. He tried to start a conversation and did not get the reaction he'd hoped for. It was probably because he was a minimum wage peen. She could probably sense it. The office hummed with cold fluorescent lighting. The air was cold and stale, lifeless. How long had John worked here? Long enough to deserve better. John was late, but he felt daring. He could sneak into the office through the archives, or he could stroll through the front entrance with enough confidence to bluff his boss. John decided to creep in through the archives. Despite the obvious flaws, John thought it was a good plan and not a recipe for humiliation. Everyone else was hard at work, grinding away. John might actually get away with this. The boss. He homed in on John, deluging him with spit and buzzwords. The boss ran out of synonyms for John's failings and gave him an ultimatum. Barbara would definitely not be interested in dating John if he was unemployed. He had to get to the quality assurance department. There might be a faulty dildo just waiting to cost the company millions in lawsuits. John would have to test them all. Every atom of John's rectum began to vibrate with the frequencies of pure pleasure. His orifice was a paradise. This vibrator would end all wars. It was good. That one was good too. Prostate Pounder X900 series, the most advanced vibrator on the market. Sweet mother of no, John, that's too much pleasure for one anus to handle. John's butt hurt, but his heart was proud. If that vibe had gotten out into the world, it could have injured a customer as badly as it had ravaged his anus. The boss arrived and congratulated John on taking one for the team and jumping on the hand grenade, or in this case, putting it up his butt. John was having trouble following the conversation because he was quite high on suppository painkillers. And then the boss said it. Promotion. Finally, the company was recognizing John's hard work and ignoring his minor faults like lack of talent, constant lateness, and flatulence. John's new office smelt like polished wood and success. John's success. Sam dropped by. He'd heard John had been hurt. John said he was fine. He wasn't a softie to complain about a mildly ruptured rectum. Besides, he had a promotion to celebrate. John had met Sam in college during a sports ball game. He'd given him some stiff competition. Even when he won, Sam never acted like he was better than John. They'd started at Flesh Corp product testing together. Nothing builds a friendship like a long day of dildo mounting. Yes, John had known Sam for a while. But John couldn't hang out with Sam. He had a reunion to prepare for. He was going out with Barbara tonight. He just had to ask her. Everyone was quiet, listening to the presentation. A good moment for John to ask Barbara out. That's not Barbara, John. Nope. Warmer. John was working his way to Barbara. Barbara agreed. Well, she nodded. Sort of. Things were really going John's way. John tried to act as suave as possible and listened to Barbara talk business. He didn't want to blow his chances at long-term love and short-term sex. Barbara began to talk about monthly feedback figures, and John started to zone out, imagining him and Barbara at the reunion, a power couple. She would make his classmates sick with envy, if he could get her to tone down the boring chatter. John's balls were gripped by certainty. Barbara was the perfect date for the reunion. John thought he would impress Barbara by going behind the bar and showing the bartender a thing or two. Despite Barbara's protests that it was unnecessary, John knew that a true gentleman should follow her home. He was excited. There was still 3 months until the reunion, and he'd already landed his perfect date. All he had to do was seal the deal. Barbara thanked John for the evening and politely did not invite him inside for coffee or sex, even though John had dropped some pretty obvious hints he'd be into both, or just the sex. The door slammed on John's hopes. He didn't understand. He'd laughed at all Barbara's pie chart jokes. He'd listened to her boring stories. The blank eyes of the lawn flamingos were witnesses to John's shame. John began the lonely walk home, thoughts tumbling like shoes in a dryer. He had done everything wrong. Barbara had led him on just to humiliate him. John felt empty. How could he get love? He felt like he was missing something, some key to attracting sex. But John was shooting blanks. What did Peens want? Then it hit John out of nowhere. Stuff. He had the success. He just needed to show it off. But where was John going to get all the stuff he wanted? John needed a sign. A new day, a new John. He waited outside his local buttload store for it to open, eager to spend his promotion bonus on stuff. The best way to impress women. Generosity overwhelmed John. Suddenly it occurred to John that he was going to make a lot of choices. and every one of those choices would tell the world who he was. Delicious. Just so Moorish. Also delicious. How could John decide?
Maybe one more.
That's enough, John thought. John swallowed the last of the snacks and his self-respect. What would a date think when they sat in John's home? Comfort or style? John went with comfort, plus it matched the couch he already had. John weighed up all the differences, but this was a tough choice. John chose the extremely, obviously bad TV. John realized that it was only 2 months and 29 days until the reunion. Time flies. Cactus or rose? Was John a rugged hero or a romantic poet? If John grew his own flowers, then he'd save on romantic gestures in the long run. There was nothing John could take with him to the grave. Except his coffin. Death is inevitable. Style is not. John liked to get his pizza delivered. That way he could see Delilah, the delivery peen. She always made him smile. Delilah thought pineapple on pizza was gross. This way she would never know John's shameful tastes. What bedding would Delilah prefer? John couldn't help wondering. Pizza sheets would show her that John could also deliver in bed. Devoid of any sense of style, buying new clothes would be John's toughest challenge. The silky fabric made John feel like a celebrity. When was the last time John had been to the beach? A nice fit, but could John pull off the colour? John might want to take the hem up a bit. John decided to go with the outfit. Music, the food of love. Should John go retro sophisticated or just retro? John's personal nostalgia was more important than sound quality. Every can was made of metal, pulled from the bones of the earth, wrestled to the surface and smelted in roaring furnaces. All so John could buy peas preserved in salty water and stick them up his butt. John's new purchases were on the way to his apartment. All he had to do was invite a date over. One look at all his stuff and they'd be overwhelmed with sexual desire. John felt proud and also hungry. It gave him an idea. He should invite Delilah over for dinner. John was excited. Delilah was on her way. He just needed to set the mood to romance. John hoped she didn't have allergies. That must be Delilah at the door. The door opened and there was Delilah. John gulped down his nerves and invited her in. John could tell that Delilah was impressed by his stuff. It was time to crank up the mood to seduction. John wanted to offer Delilah wine, but he'd already popped his cork. Delilah started looking as nervous as John felt. He assumed it was because she was shy too. They really were compatible. Of course, at the reunion, he couldn't mention Delilah was a delivery peen. That would be embarrassing. Delilah suddenly headed for the door. John hadn't even paid. And just like that, John was alone again. Delilah hadn't even looked at his stuff. Not even the pizza bedspread. The rejection burned. John felt insignificant. He had everything he wanted. The job, the money, the stuff. So much stuff. He wanted to destroy all of it. Shove it into the abyss. His stuff didn't matter. Your dead technology tapes. He was a shaft in the machine. A lonely piston pumping away like all the others in his rigid place. Nothing special about him. Why should Delilah or Barbara or any other peen be interested in dating him? He was just like everyone else and they could tell. John wanted to be special, but he had to face the numb truth. He wasn't. And all the money and stuff he'd ever accumulate wouldn't change that. He thought it would make him unique, but it just made him more like everyone else. He should leave it all. Get out of this little town and go on an adventure.
Sayonara, stool. John never liked plants anyway. Begone, boxes. Fuck off, inanimate objects.
See the world. He was a boring corporate drone, but he didn't have to be.
Die, couch.
He could be a traveler, exploring jungles and climbing mountains. He could visit the wonders of the world and get his picture taken. Like Peony Island, the unspoiled paradise he'd seen on TV. That was it. John had to travel. Bags packed, John was ready to put 5,000 miles between him and his problems. He was leaving it all behind. John was so close, he could almost smell the freedom of the skies. Security sent John back through the detector. John had forgotten he had his nail clippers with him. He'd have to buy another pair soon, or he'd look ridiculous. When the acceleration of takeoff had slackened, John felt a sweet relief. He had left his worries on the runway. He was up in the clouds, on his way to adventure. John's adventure had begun at last, and clearly it was a small world after all, and also a flat one. That was going to piss off the globeheads. John was having fun, but something told him he needed to go home. Probably his empty bank account. John was on his way back home. He was out of money, but money can't buy love. What it can buy are the experiences that had made John a more interesting and developed person, with 100 Butstagram photos to prove it. Finally, everything was going smoothly. John felt good to be back on the familiar ground of home, but he would feel better to be on the familiar mattress of home. That's not John's bag. John really loved a good prick. It took John back to his summer job picking cacti. He hadn't gone back. Not that one either. Nope. That's probably the right one. Close enough anyway. Despite John's swell of fresh optimism, traveling was exhausting, and he just really wanted to get home and get some sleep. Another nightmare. John's stress about getting a date for the reunion was making him think of her. Harmony. He hadn't seen her in years. Would she be at the reunion? John shook off the thought. He wasn't a child. He was a fully grown penis. John, why is the bathroom barricaded? John's butt started to buzz. Had he left a vibrator up there? Whatever it was, he should get it out. John's old phone. They really were indestructible. It was Sam calling. He wanted to check in on John. The travel looked fun, but it was so sudden. Was John okay? Sam was such a softie, always worrying about feelings. John had only one feeling, and it was the feeling of being awesome. He could drop Sam a text, but John was on a mission. The reunion was getting closer, and he had to get a date. Fortunately, John knew exactly where to find love. John held his breath. He was about to meet his match. He had to reassure himself he could do this. He had a good job, he had nice stuff, He had travelled. He was ready to find love. On Weena, where all his sexy travel photos would give him the pick of the pack. Hot. Sexy. Very nice. Nice shaft. Very hot. Too skinny. Gorgeous. Too short. Yep, the pick of the pack. Yes! John had the pick of the pack. John valued honesty in a date, but he had been expecting a different kind of dirty. A sexy and much more hygienic kind. John thought that getting circumcised once was enough. Oh, better put that on ice. It'll be okay, John. Chicks dig scars. I hope. After the reattachment surgery, the doctors had told John to rest. So he did, for 6 hours. Ugh, salty. John was in stitches. Karen had invited John straight over. She was not fooling around. Very exciting. And now she wanted him round the back. Karen let John know that the cake was only for the kids, so was the candy, and the piñata, and that she'd be back in 1 hour. John laughed at Melody's hilarious bullfrog story. She was adorable. Everything was going perfectly. John never saw Melody again. So far, Weena had been a parade of weirdos and rejections. If this date didn't work out, John vowed to give it up. But maybe this time, maybe today would be his day. Sharona sighed and said, "You'll do." John felt a little underdressed and a lot overwhelmed. He was surrounded by strangers, and Sharona was glaring at the muscular groom. John realized that Sharona had only brought him to create some penis envy. What a terrible plan, for so many reasons. John got excited. They were going to cut the cake. "He's mine!" Sharona screamed as she launched herself at the newlyweds.
Suddenly, penises were up and yelling, "No, he's mine!" It was a no-holds-barred cockfight. As John dodged flying glasses and cake, he felt a stab of envy. The groom had dozens of penises after him, and John had none. It was just wrong.
John left the screams and explosions behind him. It was a disastrous end to his online dating.